Today is the 9th of June 2016. I'm interviewing Robert King and his daughter Pamela Wells at the Smith Public Library. To get started, would you please state your full name and date of birth?
Robert E. King, 6/20/35.
And do you prefer Robert or
Bob?
Bob? Okay. And you?
My name is Pamela King Wells. I was born September 7th, 1964 in Wylie, Texas.
Born in Wylie. And you, Pam or Pamela?
Pam is fine.
Pam, okay. Okay, Bob, tell us a little bit about where you were born.
I was born in Dallas County, and my parents lived in Hutchins, which is South Dallas County. And from there, I moved to Dallas when I was about 5 years old. South Dallas, really. I mean, I was on the last paved road in the city of Dallas. The rest of it behind me was, south of there was all sandy or unpaved. And I started school in the, Silverstein Elementary School, which was on Pine Street in Dallas. And I went through the 3rd grade there, and then we moved to Wilmer, Texas, which is south of Dallas. And from there, I went through the 5th grade. I'm at 3rd and 4th. I had to redo the 3rd grade because they were pretty tough back in them days. And in the 5th, when I was 11 years old, my family moved to Irving, Texas, and we had a dry cleaners, and I was there from approximately 5 years. And then when I was 16, we moved to a farm southeast of Wylie, which is in the Liberty Grove area, and I started school as a sophomore in Wylie in probably November of '51, and graduated high school 1954, and played a little football. Didn't do it. We weren't very big. Probably wasn't but 125 people in the whole high school at that time. So we were a Class B school, and then from there,
How many people graduated in your class, Daddy?
there was approximately 21 seniors
21.
that graduated, and there were probably 3 or 4 more that were in that class, but they quit before then. And but there was probably 21 people in that class on the graduating class. And then after that, I went to work for Sears Roebuck at $1 and a nickel an hour. And I stayed there, and then from there I went into construction work with James Seaburn, which is a local contractor in Wylie, and I worked there. And then from there I went to Timco Aircraft as a trainee machinist, and that was in 1956, I think, and then 56, and thereabouts. Got laid off a time or two, and then went back, and then I finally went to work at Kraft Foods there in Garland in 57.
Were you still living in Wylie at the
I
time?
was still living unmarried, 21 or so years old, and but then from there, while I was at Kraft, before that, I got married to Martha Hooper, and
Which was your high school sweetheart.
and we went from her sophomore year all the way until she graduated in high school. and then in September of '56 we got married, and then I was still at Timco, and then in '57 I went to work at Kraft Foods and worked there, and then in 1961 we bought the Wylie Flower Shop. She and I bought together. I was working nights and working on a graveyard, what you call a graveyard shift, going in at 10 and getting off at 6 in the morning, and then during the day I'd be there at the shop if they delivering and or anything. But it wasn't, Wylie wasn't that big, but we have built, I think our first Valentine Day, which was the next year after we bought it, I think we run $69 worth of business on a Valentine Day.
First Valentine's Day?
In 1958.
No, 1961.
1962. And, but since then it has grown to be what you realize is the biggest single day in the flower business. From there, we, after that, in 1967, I left Kraft and went in as I was just going to go in as with my wife at the flower shop, but then Mr. McGinnis from the Corps of Engineers, he was a project manager at the Corps of Engineers, and he offered me a job during the summer for about 6 months at a year, so I took it, and then I worked there a couple of years, and then I went from there. In 1969, I was with the Sheriff's Department, Collin County, under Tom Montgomery. And in 1971, I ran for the Office of Justice of the Peace in Wylie, or in precinct, it was actually Precinct 3, which covered the southeast part of Collin County. And I run, and the next year I run unopposed, and the following year after that I realized that wasn't what, and being in business in Wylie did not, they were sort of conflicting, so I just left that.
How was there a conflict?
Well,
in being business?
I mean, I was trying to put people in jail that were customers, or maybe fining them, putting a $25 or $50 fine on them that they could have been paying their flower bill with. So I left that situation, and then we was there most all the time, and part-time I was working for a construction company at Lone Star Gas in Dallas. I mean, it was just a part-time job, but it was paying a lot of my expenses and things. I mean, the flower shop was making the money. I mean, it was doing that, and I was still making pretty good money at the construction job, so, and it was during the summer months, so, and it was pretty slow at the shop. But then I worked there for off and on for a couple of years. Then after that, I just went into the flower shop, and I am no designer or anything. I didn't put the flowers together. I could have probably put a vase or two, or made some planters or something like that, but I primarily did the delivering and cleaning up and anything that needed to be done. That's what I was doing. And then in 1994, we sold the shop to Pamela, our daughter, and her husband Danny. and then from there, I have been, involved in it. I don't really work at it hard, I mean, just doing what I have to do. I mean, I go in of a morning, get my coffee and read the paper. And if they want something, if one of the girls wants something or some deliveries, I get up, I do those. And in 2013, my wife, Martha, she passed away, and that's been 3 years ago. And I have, so I still go to the shop practically every day.
He has to show up before noon or call us. If he doesn't, he gets in trouble.
And I mean, I got to the shop about 11 o'clock this morning, right there, and Pam wanted to know where I was at. She called me on the phone and wanted to know where I was at.
He was in the parking lot.
Yeah, she keeps pretty well tabs on me if I'm not showing up or something, because I'd had a stint.
We don't want anything happening to him.
Yeah. But that's up to about the time.
Now, you did move the shop in 1967. It was across the street at what is now...
No, it was, we bought the shop, flower shop, in 1961, which was located 2 doors down from, just south of Ballard Street Cafe. I think the Wylie News was, and the Melvin's Dalfit's variety store was between us and the cafe.
Who were some of the other people downtown that
at that time in 1961, when we bought the shop, on that side of the street, Ballard Street, it was actually a Will Bar Grill, is what the name of it was. Wasn't a bar. It just the kind you push, Will Bar, and then Melvin Dalfit,
variety store.
Or Rebecca Dalfit, she had the variety store,
dime store,
and then next door to it was the Wylie News, and then the flower shop, and then the post office was next door. It's just a small building next door to the flower shop was. And then we had Taylor's grocery store, and then the bank, and then across the street was House Rat, Minor House Rat, and Elsie House Rat had the hardware and furniture store. And then at that time, in a couple of years, 63 or so, they moved across the street into the building where Shoemaker and Hart is located now.
Who moved?
It used to be the drugstore.
Who moved across the street?
Hmm?
Who moved across the street?
The Wylie Flower Shop
Okay.
moved across the street to where Shoemaker and Hart is located now, and then next door to it was a real estate office, and then the picture show. We still had the picture show there, and we had next to it was Dill's grocery store, and next door to it was Claude Allen's grocery store. We had 2 grocery stores right next to each other, and Taylor's across the street was a grocery store. We had 3 grocery stores at one time on that one block, and then from there on up we had the Western Auto and barber shops. And Wylie Butane was in the building that in the 2-story building that I later bought on the corner. It was Wylie Butane and Sports. Sold Evan Ridge Motors. And then after they moved out, and then another grocery store went in, and
Where was the funeral home? Where was the funeral home?
The funeral home was also there. It was just, we had in the building that the flower shop is in now, it was divided. There was a barber shop. Kid Moore had a barber shop. Mr. McClung, he was also in there. And then in that building at one time, the post office used to be there. Because when we tore the walls out...
After the fire, we tore the walls out.
Yeah. Well, after the fire, we tore the paneling off and everything. You can still see some of the post office posters still on the walls. And
then what was on the corner?
And then Provident Bank, First State Bank in Wylie moved up there on the corner where the Q is, or whatever.
No, the Q.
The Q is located, that building. They moved into that building. And then on up the street was Posey's. Raymond Posey had a mobile station. John Hatfield was involved in it. And then Paul Pearson had where they
had the ice house.
Ice house and little drive-in, which is where the Minute Market is, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The little service.
Where the service station is downtown.
Right there.
Convenience store. What was Johnston's across the street?
No, Johnston, when we came to Wylie, I don't remember when, probably about that same time that in 1961, it was probably in the Woodsman of the World building, which is on the southeast corner of Ballard and Oak, a two-story building. That's where Johnston's factory was. And then later they built a building and...
Where today First Baptist Event Center is.
Where the First Baptist Event Center is. And in 1961, when we bought the flower shop, we bought it in, I think, May of 61. And then a month or so later, Harry Tibbles came to town. And he bought the grocery store down on where it was Blackman's grocery store at that time. He and I started in business in 1961 is when he came to town, and he has been a great asset to this town since then. He and his wife Rita.
You know where the Wylie supermarket sign is?
Mm-hmm.
That's Tibbles.
That was a wooden building of Blackman's grocery store, and Shorty Martin had a real estate office next door to it, and there was a washateria on that location, and a service station, and where Dennis has his office. It used to be a little gathering point cafe, and drive-in. That's where all the kids hung out. I mean, after we'd have a date or something, we'd end up at the White Way. It was called the White Way area, and that's about in 1958. My wife and I bought a house on South Ballard, 307 South Ballard, one of the little brick houses there on the left. And then in 64, we bought a house out on Lake Levon. That's where, in 1964, and I've been there ever since. And that's got us up to date on where Pam bought
Well, who did you buy the flower shop from?
I bought the flower shop from, Jack Mary Parker.
It had,
And it was, and before that, they bought it from, a year or two before that, they bought it from, a lady by the name of Lou Prince. And apparently she had had it while we were in high school and all. And I don't know whether anyone was between her and Miss Douglas or not, but I think Miss Douglas is the one that started the flower shop.
Did you know the Parkers very well?
Oh yes, I knew Jack, Mary, and their son, and we went to church together and did social together and square dance together and.
yeah, they used to square dance at the old Methodist Church Education Building. They'd have their little tutus, or they were real cute.
And I did all that, and then I guess I first started the Wylie Chamber of Commerce back in mid-60s or so. I was a director of the Chamber of Commerce at that time, which we met in a space there that Johnston's factory provided, and Chamber of Commerce didn't do a whole lot. We pushed things around, but Truett Smith, which was the banker, and he pretty well organized and kept things moving in Wylie at that time, in the 60s. And then, because he was, Truett was, a lot of people fussed at him because sometimes he was hard to deal with, but he was trying to do things for the betterment of Wylie and himself. Because when I bought the building in Wylie, there on the corner of Ballard and Marble, the two-story building, I went to the bank and I said, Truett, I want to buy that building and I need to borrow the money. He said, no, Bob, I wouldn't buy that building. But that same night, me and the man that owned the building, we came to an agreement, and I bought it. I bought the building because if
now you bought the bottom half of the building.
I bought the bottom half. The Masonic Lodge was upstairs, but then if I hadn't have bought that building that night, Truett would have had that building the next day. So. After that, I went back to it. After I bought the building, signed the papers on the building, I went back to him and said, now I want to borrow the money to remodel. And I borrowed almost as much as I wanted to buy the building for. And there was no problem with that, since I already had the building and he couldn't get it. But the way he did things, he knew about things before anything, and if it was in his interest, he'd take advantage of it. Take advantage of it, and that's why he ended up as
successful,
a good civic leader, and but he was a good man. And Truett and Rita both were good people, and they did a lot for Wylie.
So when did you buy you have there are three buildings in the flower shop, Dad, and you bought the bottom building in 1967.
And then the Masons were building the lodge where it's located now. but they's running out of money, so I said, I'll buy the top of the building, and you can stay there until you get the lodge completed, the new lodge completed, and then they were there about 3 or 4 months, I guess, rent free and all. So, but I paid them for the top of the lodge, and they continued with the building of the present lodge. And then in I don't remember what the date was. I've got it at home, but the funeral home was located at Rita and W.C. Allen had the Wylie Allen. Well, it was actually the Allen Funeral Home at that time, and that's when they built a new building out where it's located now by the cemetery, and then I moved part of I bought that building and remodeled it a little bit, and I had a separate room. It was divided into 2 different rooms, parts of it, but they had where their chapel was. I just converted it into another wedding chapel. But then all the older men in town, I had a table set up, one of them 8-foot
Because the
tables.
drugstore had closed. When Brookshire's came in, they offered to buy out Pendergrass drugstore, and that's where all the old men in town would meet and drink coffee. And so when the drugstore left, they didn't have anywhere. So Daddy opened that up, and all the old men would come in and drink coffee.
I'd have the big coffee pot set up, cups out, sugar and cream, and they'd come in after when the flower shop opened at 8 o'clock. The girls would go over and unlock the door, so they'd come in and have their coffee. We'd sit and talk. And there was people like Melvin Delpit, Hubert Allen, Sam Self, R.K. McDonald, Melvin, and Mr. Connolly, and there was several of us. I was probably the youngest one of the whole bunch, but I sat over there, and that's where I got most all of my information from the older people in Wylie. Hubert Allen, Melvin Delpit, Sam Self, because they were
old Wylie.
Yeah. Well, I thought they were here when I came to Wylie, and I thought they were old men then. But then, as a teenager, I thought them old people. But there wasn't 10 or 15 years difference in our ages. But then from there, Pamela took over the flower shop in 1994, and she's had it ever since. She grew up I had 2 kids, one William Robert and Billy Bob, which was born in 57, and then Pam was born in 64, and they both went through Wylie High School, both graduates of East Texas State, which is now Texas A&M, and then Pamela, after she graduated from college, from East Texas, she attended law school at Texas Tech University and graduated 3 years later with a law degree. Then she went to Denton County. She was working as an attorney in Denton County at that time, and then she had a son, Robert Cole. He was born in
91.
And then they came to Wylie because she She said she had a happy childhood growing up in Wylie in the Wylie Flower Shop. She wanted him to have the same advantage. So, 95, 94, they came to Wylie, and we've been there. And Cole is also a graduate of Wylie High School, and Pam has a stepdaughter, Wendy. She is a graduate of Wylie High School, and she also received a Birmingham scholarship. Went to college at Baylor University, and then into physical therapist training, and now she's in Tennessee, and she has 2 children. And I've got 5 grandkids.
No.
Oh, I've got more than that.
You've got 7.
I've got 7 grandkids.
Billy has
And
5.
He's got 5. Pam has 2. 7 grandkids, and I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 great grandkids. But they're not here. The only one that's here is Cole, and he
loves his pawpaw.
But that's up to about now.
Well, before we go to Pam, do you have any stories from being Justice of the Peace?
Well, I was Justice of the Peace in 60s, in 71 and 72, 76, I think. And then,
What were your responsibilities?
well, I mean, just the judicial.
Didn't you marry people?
Oh yeah, I did what normal JP's Justice of the Peace did. I mean, did the marriage. And,
But those people that you married, they were married in the flower shop, and they had the advantage of all the decorations.
Yeah, well, I did perform. As a matter of fact, this past month or so, some lady came in and said, I got married in this flower shop." Wow. And that's been
Years.
40 years ago, I guess. And but I've had 2 or 3 of them come in and say they got married there in the flower shop. I performed the services. But then some other incidents that happened while I was with the sheriff's department. That's when the Manson deal happened in California, Sharon Tate murders, and they were transferred to what's his name? Watson, Tex Watson. He was one of the instigators of that situation, and they transferred him, and he came back to Texas, and he lived in his parents lived in Cokeville. He was a nephew of the sheriff at that time, Tom Montgomery, and while he was in custody there in Collin County, I pretty well took care of him. I mean, no one else would, other than his parents and the sheriff. I probably had more dealings with him than anything. And then when they was having his trial in California, after they extradited him to California, and they said he had his trial out there, I was subpoenaed, and I flew to California and testified in that court as to what his mental conditions and what his actions were while I had him in custody in Collin County.
So what happened to him?
Well, he's still in prison. I think he's got married and made a preacher, and he just got back in the late 60s or so. He probably got mixed up with the Manson clan and had all the drugs and everything at that time, and just messed his mind up. And, but after while I had him in custody in Collin County, he was a reasonably normal person, and as to his how he acted and what he said and what he was in there. And at one time, he never did admit that he killed those people in California, Sharon, Tate. But he did relate to me that he knew where he was going. He knew he was going to go to hell for what he had done, and but he never did admit to me as to what occurred there in California. And there was the 6 years I served as JP. I would perform inquest. I mean, there was accidents and.
You mean you pronounced them dead?
Yeah, I'd hold the inquest on them, and if there was an inquest, and then because before they could ever move a body or anything, I had to be there and approve it and make sure the cause of death and determine what the cause of death was, whether it was accident, suicide, murder, or whatever. But those are some of the experiences that I've had. And I know when I was a sophomore, a junior in high school, that's when Lake Levon, the dam, opened. And we, the ag class, agriculture, FFA board, we went out and served a meal to all the dignitaries and all at the opening ceremonies of Lake Levon. And that's when people like Ray Roberts and Sam Rayburn and several other the politicians at that time were in office, and they were attended there, and we did get to meet them, you know. But we served them their barbecue and had the ceremony out there, the FFA chapter. That was in probably 1953, and I think that's when the ceremony, Lake Levon, the dam closed. They completed the dam in 1953. And, we used to water ski out there at Levon, and before the had the ceremony of the opening of the closing of the dam, they had the dam was completed and all. They was clearing the timber and everything out, but it was during the summer of '53. We'd haul hay during the day as a teenager and whatever else we did. Then at night we'd go out and go around the gate and go swimming in the down below the spillway, and that was about the best place we could go find a swim and all at that time. But at night we could go out there at night because they wouldn't let us in there during the day, I don't think, and maybe fishermen or something and all. But at night, after we'd get through working or something during the day, and at night we'd go out, go swimming. They had the lights on the dam and all, so you could see. But I do remember all of that. And then in 57 is when they had the big flood out there. They had to open the gates and flood everything. That's when they flooded the highway out, old highway and out the railroad. It all went out because they had to open the floodgates, let the water, release the water, and they just wiped the highway out and everything.
Highway 78.
Yeah, Highway 78 was the old highway, and then the Santa Fe Railroad was there. Oh, that was Cotton Belt. That was the Cotton Belt Railroad, because the railroads crossed out there. One over. When one went below Santa Fe, went below the dam, right below the dam, and then the Cotton Belt was further down along the highway, and they closed it off. But the old tracks and all were washed out.
So Pam, let's kind of switch to you, and you could start off by telling me what you remember, of Wylie as a child.
I remember being raised on the streets of downtown. I would go to school in the afternoons. I'd walk from Hartman, or Mom would pick me up in the white van. One time I jumped into a white van and it wasn't Mom. It was some other person. So anyway, I remember going to Hartman Elementary, and then after school I'd come up and I would get to go to the drugstore, which was Pendergrass drugstore, and they had a soda fountain, and I would get something to eat. On Saturdays I would go there and sit with the old men, and those booths are now over at Ballard Street Cafe. And I look at those booths today and I wonder how two grown men and me could sit in one side, because those booths are small. I think they just made people smaller back then. I remember sitting with Fritz Moss.
Yeah.
And there was always like 3 guys in there, and I could run the streets without anybody because everybody knew me. I would go to the funeral home next door, and Rita and WC had a couch and a TV, which was great. So I could go over there and watch cartoons in the afternoon if I wanted to. I was told, and I remember Beulah Hall, she was a lady from downtown. She lived on North Ballard, down there.
Catholic Church.
Yeah, right past the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Now, and she would take me in the stroller and go up and down and visit people. And then I remember a man named Jack Andrews, Jack Andrews, and he'd come by the flower shop and get me, and we'd go walk the town also. It was just a nice feeling that I could go up and down the street and have the neighbors or the shopkeepers. I remember going across the street at Dowsett's Dime Store, and I remember walking in the candy bar. They had this bar that was had candy laying horizontal, and then they had it going perpendicular. Or this is horizontal, and this is vertical.
Yeah.
And it was full of candy.
So it was candy stacked up in pie?
No, it wasn't stacked. It was all laid out, and then it had it stacked up on the side, and it was just like a kid's dream, And I would think it was like 10 feet long, but it was probably 6 foot. How everything looks bigger when you're small. And I'd get candy, and I remember Miss Dowsett. That was the clutterest store there was downtown, but she knew where everything was. If you needed a pair of socks, she could go exactly and get a pair of socks. I remember they would have an outside photographer come in once a year, and they would take pictures of everyone in town, and you could order the pictures there. I remember Edna's Cafe, which is on the corner, the only vacant lot on downtown Wylie right now. And I remember Edna, she would make me 2 pieces of white bread smothered with mashed potatoes and gravy on top. I remember getting their hamburgers down there. So it was just a great place to be raised. I didn't stay at home that much when I was little because I stayed at the flower shop. I was actually born on September 7th, which was Labor Day in 1964. Mom went across the street to where the Baptist Church steeple is today. That was where the hospital was. I was born in that hospital, and as I understand, Dr. Trimble was Mom's doctor, but he was out of town, and Dr. Hilly was his new associate, and I was the first baby that Dr. Hilly delivered at the Wylie Hospital. And then I always say, yeah, Mom put me in a flower box, shoved me under the table, and kept me at the flower shop ever since.
So how far back in your family does floristry go? Your mom was involved in it?
My mom was a florist. My grandmother was a florist. Her husband's mother was a florist in Dallas. She had the House of Flowers in Dallas. No. Hattie?
Hooper Vesey Flores in Dallas.
Hooper Vinci?
Vesey Flores
Vesey
in
Flores.
Dallas. It was in East Dallas. They're off of Lakewood area. And
that was my great grandmother Hattie. Anyway, and so her son was Warren Henry, and married my grandmother Martha Lucille Knight, and then they had 3 children, and each of their children each owned a flower shop. One owned a flower shop in Denton, which is the youngest son. He took over Mimi and Pawpaw's flower shop. One owned the House of Flowers in Sherman, and then Mom and Dad owned the one in Wylie. So I've got a lot of help come Valentine's and those busy holidays. My cousin Warren took over his father's shop in Denton. I took over the shop for Mom and Dad, and my aunt, which had the shop in Sherman, her 3 girls worked in flower shops, and one of them runs a shop in Sherman today, but doesn't own it. One had a flower shop in Lovelady, Texas, but has since closed it because she went to work for the state for better benefits. And then the other girl, she comes and helps and has worked in flower shops throughout. So it's like I'm a 4th generation florist, I can say. When you were young, was it something that you thought, maybe I do? No, because when you're young, you want to get away. Like my first date was a football banquet, and where did my date pick me up? He picked me up at the flower shop. Okay, because we did corsages. For my prom, my senior prom pictures were on the stairwell at the flower shop, and because we did corsages, so that's where I dressed, that's where I got ready, that's where my date picked me up. I got to stay out all night on my senior prom. We went to Six Flags after prom, and the next day that was on a Friday night. The next day was Mother's Day, so he brought me back to the flower shop. I went upstairs. I was sleeping for a couple of hours, and there was a lady that had come upstairs because we had the gift shop there, and she ran downstairs and told Mom, "There's a girl that's passed out on the stairs." She says, "No, that's just my daughter." So after I got a couple hours sleep, you get up and you go help at the flower shop. When I was 12 years old, Mom and Dad opened a gift shop, and they named it Pam's Nook. And it was in the first shopping center that Wylie had, which is First Center. It's where Domino's is, where Media Burger is now. I'm so sorry.
Turn that thing off.
I did. Where Media Burger is, that shopping center, that is where Pam's Nook was. In fact, right next to Pizza Getty is where Mom and Dad bought like half a building, or not bought, but leased half a building, and that's where Pam's Nook started. And it was, we did wedding registry for dishes and silverware and towels and everything, because back then, going to the big city was not a easily obtainable objective, okay? So Mom and Dad opened this so that people, when the brides were getting married, and Mom did all the weddings, and they would go to Pam's Nook and register for their flatware and their dishes and their crystal, and we carried crystal, and we carried all of that, and towels. And I started running that when I was 12 years old. And then after it was a success, so we moved over to next door to where Meteor Burger is. We got a whole building, and that was Pam's Nook, and it was successful until Mom and Dad bought the building above us, above where the flower shop is, the Masonic Lodge, and then we moved Pam's Nook upstairs and combined it with Wylie Flower Shop. Before that, when I was 7 years old, I started working at a snow cone stand, and I made really good money because it was the only snow cone stand in town. We had the lake that was open. People would go to the lake, they would come back through, get snow cones. I would stay until 9 o'clock. It was open till 9 o'clock. My next door neighbor, Danny and Lloyd Norris, owned it, and I worked there for 30% commission. And our small snow cone was 25 cents, and our large snow cone was 50 cents. I made good money, 30% commission. So I stayed there and worked as much as possible. I remember a long line. Well, first of all, the snow cone stand didn't have a restroom. Okay, so I would go across the street to Joe G's convenience store when I needed to go to the restroom. But if there was a long line, I just stayed and waited on that long line, because I wasn't going to let those customers go without snow cones. So from 7 years old to 12, I worked the snow cone, and then from 12 years old until I went off to school. Went to East Texas State in 1982. I graduated Wylie High School in 82 and went to school in August of 82. I graduated in December of 85. I came back and worked 6 months for Albert Masters, which is the attorney in town, to get an idea of what I wanted to do. I went to Texas Tech Law School and graduated in 89. Then I came back and worked for a little bit for Mike Strasser, which was the attorney in town, in 89, until I went to work for the DA's office in Denton County. And in 91, I had a special needs son. In 94, it was like I had 10 therapy sessions a week for him. So, and there were some changes going on in the DA's office when you get a new elected official and stuff. So I just decided that being raised in downtown Wylie was a great experience, and I could raise my son. So I brought him back, him and my husband and stepdaughter back to Wylie. We bought a house, then raised my son in the streets of downtown Wylie.
So no regrets about leaving the DA office?
No regrets. I still practice some, but now I get to practice for who I want, when I want, on my timeline. So.
How's the flower business changed over the years?
Oh, it's changed a lot, especially with the internet. And there's a lot of order gatherers, like 1-800-Flowers. The FTD and Teleflora, which are the two big corporations, they used to work for the florist. You know, they had the florist best in mind. In fact, FTD was originally created by the florist, owned by the florist, and then in 95, I think, they went public. So, I bought shares, and then they came out with one buyer that wanted to buy everything up. And so we went along with it, and once it became public and not run by the florist, they had their best interest in mind and not the florist. So they're actually competing against the individual mom and pop local owned florist. And since the internet has come through, there's a lot of order gatherers out there. It's basically a warehouse full of phones and people at them that know nothing about flowers, and they're taking their orders, and you don't necessarily get the customer service that the mom and pop local owned florists were accustomed to giving their customers. So you get a lot of angry people because they have gone through and had bad experiences ordering flowers, and that reflects on the mom and pop stores, which we have no control over. So I would rather people just come to the mom and pop local owned florist, so you know who you're dealing with, and the people there actually know and can educate you the difference in flowers, or their quality, or their price, or their function. They have just basically knowledge and education that they can teach the customer, whereas since the internet's come and you've got a whole room full of people that know nothing about flowers. So that's why it's best to order locally.
And your fourth generations, are there any lessons or values that have been passed down in your family pertaining to the business side?
Integrity. You know, be honest, offer your customers good service, good quality, serve your community, give back to the community. That was one of the things when Mom said, when she sold me the store, is that, Pam, you've got to get involved in the community. You've got to give back. And so when I came back, I started getting involved. And like Dad has always been involved in Lions Club. You know, Mom was involved in church.
Garden club. Actually,
book club.
Back in those days, there was only two, what you'd call civic. There was the Lions Club, which the men belonged to, and the Garden Club, which the women belonged to. And
there was the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah, but the Masonic Lodge, it's a fraternal type.
Mm-hmm. And there's a still bit.
You know, it's not a gathering of local people. I mean, it's not a social gathering or anything like such as the Lions Club or the Garden Club. But we were the only two civic
group
organizations in town.
When I do remember, we had a volunteer fire department, and the Allen Funeral Home also ran the ambulance service back then, and most of them were volunteer firemen. And the fire department was at the end of the street where the pawn shop is now, right next to Old City Park. And every year they would have a fundraiser where they would cook barbecue chicken legs, and everyone would go to the fire station and they would buy their dinners and sit in there and eat and stuff. So I think that's where the Downtown Merchants started organizing to help that group, and that's the beginning of Wylie Downtown Merchants Association. We would have ice cream. Everyone was on the block. You were supposed to make 5 gallons of homemade ice cream, and we would sell the ice cream and donate the proceeds to the fire department. And that's basically where the Downtown Merchants all started working together.
And we had bingo.
Yeah, they had bingo.
Oh, bingo in the fire
bingo.
Yeah, they'd pull the fire trucks out, and they'd have where the fire trucks were, bingo.
Everybody played bingo.
So I think that's where downtown merchants started getting together and start doing things, and then they started the July Jubilee, out of that, whole function of raising money for the fire department, the volunteer fire department. And it's just grown since then, as in Wylie Downtown Merchants now have the pedal car races, which we donate $1,000 from that to Wylie Saxey Murphy Special Olympics, which is very dear to my heart. Then we have the Boo on Ballard. We have the Bluegrass on Ballard, which is what we used to call the July Jubilee. We used to start with the rodeo, and that was changed over to the Wylie Chamber of Commerce now does the rodeo. What's the other events? And I'm on the event committee. Boo on Ballard, did I say that? Okay, Boo on Ballard has grown tremendously. We used to have the merchants dress up and have their shops open and allow the children to come through. And I remember it used to be maybe 30 kids or so, and now there's well over 3,000 children that come downtown on that night. And it's just grown. So I remember Wylie having a flashing red light at Ballard and Highway 78. When I left Wylie in 1982, we had 3,500 people in the town, and everybody knew everybody. You had party lines back there, so everybody knew everybody's business. And when I came back in 91, we were probably 25,000 or so. I don't know exactly how big. It was big, but in the last 10 years, it's just exploded. I mean, I was talking to the mayor the other day, and we're close to 50,000, and that's inside the city limits. That's not the service area that merchants serve outside of the 36 miles the city exists in.
So do you think there's any way to hang on to those small town values that you look back on as a child?
Well, I tell you, it would be very scary if a child hopped into someone else's van. It would be very scary to pick up somebody on the side of the road now, whereas used to we do it. Yeah, we would do it. Somebody, I remember one day we were headed to Garland, me and Mom, and she pulled over, and I couldn't believe she was pulling over. Well, she was picking up Bill Collins. He was walking on the side of the road, on the side of the highway, and I couldn't believe, Mom, you're picking up a hitchhiker. But, you know, it was not a bad thing back then because you knew who people were. And today, I can't remember faces or names, and so many people use the telephone or the internet to order flyers from, so I know their name, but if they walked in the shop, I couldn't put the name with the person. Where used to, we could. We used to, when I was little, collect the water bills for Wylie Northeast.
Wylie Northeast.
And that was one of the things to help bring people into the flower shop that Mom offered as a service. We would take their water bills. And I had an older lady, not an older lady, I mean she was older than me, but she came in and she was just, I remember paying the water bill here when I was a little girl. And it's something about the smell of the flower shop. People come in and they smell the flower shop, they smell the flowers, which I don't anymore. But the smell is supposed, your sense of smell is your strongest sense, and it triggers memories. So when that lady walked into the flower shop, she remembered as a child coming in there and paying the water bill with her parents. So that's pretty cool.
And at one time, before we moved up on the corner, we was across the street where Shoemaker and Hart is located. Kathleen Moore used to register cars. Each community would register vehicles, at the end of the year when they'd all come due. They didn't come due by the month now, it was at the end of towards the end of the year that everybody registered their automobile, and she had a desk we'd set a desk up in the flower shop, and she would sell license plates to the local people, and
so that was a service that
was
we gave back to the community. No.
That was, and we've always, my wife and I have always believed in public relations. You've got to treat the customer the way you would want to be treated yourself, and
and that's the way you can keep the hometown feeling.
What's the strangest order you've ever received, a request?
Well, we, not too long ago, we sent an empty vase to the school, and for an anniversary or something, and that was because he wanted to continually fill the vase, or something about her continually fill the life of. But she didn't like it. You send me a vase with no flowers in it, and then we've had several people, they want you to send dead flowers out. Well, I won't do that anymore. I mean, because I don't want people seeing that as a reflection of the flower shop.
Not good for public relations.
Not good for public relations. But the empty vase was probably the last weird request we had.
And we've had requests for, at funerals and things like that, we've had to create odd-shaped flowers or such as we've done them in the shapes of guitars and
tractors. We did a Tweety bird.
And we've done, somebody that liked, that was a farmer or something, they'd want a John Deere tractor.
And that was Dad's job. Actually, Mom would draw them out on a piece of newspaper, and then Dad would cut out the shape out of the styrofoam. That was one of his many jobs.
Yeah. Or make a guitar or hearts or something like that. I mean, we've done guitars and hearts and Masonic lodges and Masonic emblems and Eastern Star emblems. Somebody come in and want something, we'd do it.
Well, as we kind of start to wrap up, I'd just like to hear about there were two disasters that hit downtown in the 90s. There was a tornado, I believe, on Mother's Day, 1993. Mm-hmm. Was the store damaged by that?
The only damage we had to the store was we had the windows upstairs boarded up. They were just covered, and there was a splintered 2x4 stuck through one of those windows. That's the only damage we had during it, and everything behind us and up the street pretty well destroyed. They're there on Jackson Street and all the way up to the Catholic Church and out that way. But it missed downtown Wylie at that time. It didn't. Ballard Street, very little damage. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether there was any damage other than that one splintered 2x4 through that window upstairs, and that's about the only damage we had on
that
downtown area. And then it went from there up north and did damage up that way. But it did a lot of damage. There where the auto store is now. There used to be a Eckerd's drugstore there. It demolished it.
In the subway.
Mm-hmm.
People that were in the subway went in and got in the freezer. It saved them. So, and if there's a storm that has come through at the flower shop, we had the old bank vault. That was the safest place, so we would go in. And in fact, the hailstorm that came through the other night, I went in and got in the old safe, the old vault. And I told the workers, I told them to get down in there with me, and we were in there, and those hell balls were just coming through the window at us, but we were safe. So, I do remember a tornado, or I don't remember it. Mom has told me about it. Dad was working nights, and I was just a baby, and my brother was in his room, and his cousin David was spending the night. And it was in the middle of the night. Mom said something whispered in her ear, get up and get the kids. And so, you know, I think it was God or an angel telling her to get up out of a dead sleep. She yelled at Billy to get to the basement, Billy and David to get to the basement, and he said, get Pam. She says, I'm getting her. And we all went to the basement, and then all of a sudden, we heard, or they heard something, and we had a German Shepherd that was outside, and Billy went upstairs to check and see if he could get the German Shepherd in, and he came back down and said, Mom, there's a boat in our backyard. And after the storm was over the next morning, it wasn't a boat, it was our neighbor's roof.
Wow.
So that was a tornado that had hit us, but because we had a basement and there's not many houses, if any, in our house and our neighbor's house, and then the old stone house that was just moved in front of the fire station now, those are the only houses in Wylie that have basements, and we were safe because of that.
What about the fire in '98?
The fire in '98.
Oh boy.
I got a call. I don't know who it was from, and said the flower shop was on fire. So I go down there, and it wasn't the flower shop. It was the candle shop next to the flower shop.
Is that where it started?
It started there because of faulty, the water or the lightning had hit faulty wiring in the candle shop. And the fire department was there, and lots of people were there. And they put out the fire. We got in that far side, we had moved Pam's nook from upstairs to downstairs to where the wedding chapel used to be. So we still had dishes and silverware and crystal and all those gift items downstairs, and we really only got water and smoke damage. The fire department had contained it. They did break through the brick at the front of the shop. Tried to, but it's 3 bricks thick. It's a pretty sturdy building.
And where they were breaking through, it's just a wall up from the roof, and they were trying to go through there to vent it. And me and the fire chief were across the street looking at it. They was up there with a hammer and all trying to knock a hole through that wall. And I said, what's he doing that for? He said, he's got to vent it. I said, there's nothing on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so
because
they quit that then.
Because it was a 2-story building. And
I don't know whether they repaired that brick or not.
Yeah, it's been repaired. I've since repaired it. But they contained it. I remember the only thing that I wanted out of that shop were the records, which we keep. You kept them in a different area, and they were in the vault. I wanted to get the backup records because they had all my receivables on them. And I wanted to get my truck that I had just painted yellow away from the building, and they wouldn't let me do that either. So they contained it, and it was all just smoking the next day. And then at the other end of the street, the Lady Light shop caught on fire.
Same time. They just finished putting one out
and they went to the other.
And then they had another one on the other end of town. So we had all the fire departments from all the local
areas,
visiting cities, neighboring cities, fire department, Plano, Garland, Raleigh. They were all there during the other one, so they just worked on that one too.
Yeah.
But it pretty well destroyed the Lady Light shop.
And the candle shop. But
and then they tore the building down, and that's when
J. Davis.
It was a vacant lot there for a while, and then J. Davis built the Davis building. I think it's called the Davis building. there where the baby shop is now.
Baby Boutique, Rock and Royalty is now. Going back to my childhood, besides the downtown area, one of the other areas I remember was Chapman's Restaurant. Best chicken fried steak there was, and that was a hometown family cafe. It started out really small, on that little triangle shape, there at Oak and the highway, on the highway across from downtown, which would be east. It started out there as a very, very small, I mean, it wasn't much bigger than this room, as a cafe, and then they built a bigger cafe where the Jack in the Box is today. And lots of memories, lots of old time Wylie, just good family, and Dad found this memories at Chapman's, and that was at the first location and the second location, and I'll give you a copy of it so you can put with it. But old time Wylie's going to remember some of these memories.
Well, thanks so much for bringing those in. Is there anything that you'd like to add that I didn't ask you today?
I was chosen to go to Girl State when I was in high school, and that was a very, very nice learning experience. That's where I had decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. There was a speaker from Houston that had come in, and I just thought, oh wow, that's pretty cool. So I went back home and told Mom and Dad, and they just sort of pushed it from there because they wanted a lawyer in the family. They never suspected that I would come back and buy the shop.
She jumped out of frying pan into the fire when
I did.
She did that because
there's a lot of hard work in being a business owner, and everybody thinks being a business owner is all nice and easy.
And working with those flowers and all, and I mean, oh, that's lovely. I'd love to do that. But
it's a hard business.
It is a hard job, and then having to run the business and all. And she was an attorney for the district attorney's office, and
I had set hours, time off.
Yeah, and
now it's continuous.
And it began when her son was born. It was pretty stressful on her. She thought she'd come back to Wylie and relax a little, but she didn't. She jumped out of the frying pan into the fire.
But when
it has at times been very stressful on her.
But I did have my parents here, and they were a big help. Having family and friends, and a hometown atmosphere is great for raising a family, and the support they give me has just been unbelievable. So.
Well, that sounds like a good way to stop. This concludes the interview with Robert King and Pamela Wells on the 9th of June 2016. The interviewer was Randall Cross.